Get ready for a brand new 2024 Aston Martin Vantage, and this looks very, very nice. It has this classic Aston Martin front fascia, and I feel like Aston Martin here is going back to that original, almost DB9 design in the front end. It's a pretty substantial facelift for the 2024 model year. So we're gonna have a look at this from a front, side, and rear, and then I'm gonna take these spy photos that we have, and I'm gonna try to figure out, redesign the current Aston Martin Vantage into what I think this is going to look like. We can see pretty much what it's going to look like behind all this camo, so it should be a pretty easy redesign to do. But before we do that, let's read this article from Motor Authority. I'm going to link this down in the description. Here you can see all the photos of this new Vantage and look at how these headlights now has more of a way more traditional look than what we have in the current one. And I'm not so sure if that is a cool thing or it's definitely not a bad thing. But the thing I like with the current generation Aston Martin Vantage is that it looks so different from pretty much any other Aston, specifically in the front end. As you can see, the rear end looks to be pretty much identical to what we have now. Not sure if we have this little air vent right here in the current generation. But before we jump into Photoshop, let's talk about the spec and tank and what we know so far. Aston Martin is in the process of renewing its sports car lineup. You have the new DB12 replacing the DB11. And now we have video shots of the new Vantage going around the Nürburgring as well. And as I said, this is going to be more of a major update to the current generation as opposed to a ground up brand new redesign. We will likely see, most likely, because we can clearly see it here, but a new front end design with larger headlights, any more conservative grille in Aston Martin traditional shape, and have a look at, listen to what this sounds like. And looking at this front fascia, it definitely reminds me of the Aston Martin DBS when I see it from afar. But it looks to go pretty well. I mean, it is an Aston Martin after all. You still have 503 horsepower in... Oh, it sounds so good with a V8 rumble. So let's pause this for a second. The Aston Martin will no longer offer a V12 in the Vantage. The automaker launched its last of a V12 Vantage sports car in 2022. And this means that the sole powertrain will likely continue to be the 4-liter V8 that is sourced from Mercedes-Benz with 503 horsepower. So say goodbye to the manual as well, because the Vantage was the last manual in Aston Martin's lineup. And Greta, I'm gonna need the screen right here, so I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to move a little bit, thank you. The Vantage was the last in Aston Martin's lineup to offer a manual, and that is pretty sad, because I think the Vantage is the car in the lineup, the small one, that I feel would probably still be very attractive if they still offered a manual for that one, but that's not going to happen for 2024 model year. And you're also going to have a brand new interior. The interior is probably the one piece in the current Vantage that I feel is way over stylized if you compare it to the exterior design. You can look for the new one to be revealed later this year as a 2024 model year. It just looks great, even with all this camo that we have on it. Passing this Golf GTI here. The grille also looks a lot higher than what it is now. There's one detail in the front, except for the headlights, that I love with this new Vantage that we don't have in the current pre-facelift Vantage. So let's jump into Photoshop here. Let's talk about this design, because this, as I said, is the one Aston Martin that I feel looks completely different from anything else that Aston has done in the front end. I actually like these tiny small headlights. I've heard from a lot of people that these headlights are not the best headlights in the business, and I think that has to do with the size of them and how slim they are. They don't really light up the road as you expect them to do, but that's one sacrifice you're gonna have to make if you want to have tight looking headlights like this. And then we have this shelf here, which I'm not a huge fan of, how this line now cuts in to this piece. It does create sort of a chamfer underneath here, but in the new facelift you can clearly see that this is way smoothed out. This entire section is going to be all smooth and rounded, and we're going to have still these two lines cutting into the corners of this grille, but this entire hood design is going to be a lot more inspired by the new DB12, and that is what I'm going to do with the redesign. Now, looking at the one detail I said I was going to mention here in the front end that I love of the new redesign is that this part down here, we now have a connection, a body-colored connection with this piece. So this red in the new one is going to extend and create the lower framing for this grille. So we don't just have the grille crashing into the bottom without having any sort of body color support underneath it, and that is going to change for the 2024 model year. The side view looking fantastic. I love this shoulder line that dips down here, creating one single curvature going from the very beautiful ducktail in the rear end, one of the coolest looking rear ends of this segment of car in my opinion, because I love how they implemented that also in the DBX. They basically took the exact same rear end from the Vantage and implemented that in the DBX. We have some graphics here, very fluid and organic design. Same goes for this line down here at the bottom. Beautiful design. Proportions, as always. Aston Martin, if you want to talk proportions specifically for a two-door front-engine coupe, Aston Martin is definitely the brand that you want to study, because it's very, very hard to beat Aston Martin in proportions when it comes to the side view. Now, rear view, as I said, as I showed you in the spy photos, is essentially going to look exactly the same. It looks like even the diffuser down here is going to be the same. Still not a bad idea. However, this interior, if you look at the angles of these air vents on the side, it just looks way too over stylized. And this gauge cluster here looks like a face of an alien or something. Then you have the integration of the infotainment screen, which is not too bad. And this area is actually a part that I love of the Vantage, because we have all these physical buttons down there. So now let's jump into the redesign here. I'm gonna take this photo and redesign this into what I believe the new Aston Martin is going to look like. And this is a very interesting approach from Aston Martin to bring this back in this very classic Aston Martin style. As I said, to me, when I look at this front end with the camo, it looks like almost a modernization of the Aston Martin DBS, of course with a smaller footprint, because this is a smaller Vantage, but the hood lines and everything else in the front end reminds me a lot of the new DB12, specifically the hood lines that we're gonna have on the new Vantage that are clearly visible in the spy photos. Definitely looks a lot like the ones that we have on the DB12. The thing I'm not so sure about here, how this is going to look like, is the integration of the grille. Over the years, Aston Martin grills have just grown and grown and grown and grown, and they are so big now that it look like a big mouth at the bottom piece. You can probably figure out a way to have it this size and have it be integrated in a smooth way, but it's gonna be very hard to do, specifically on this smaller package that is the Vantage. But again, I don't think Aston Martin is gonna mess this up, because they rarely do mess up their designs. Still some of the best looking sports cars. Looking at the headlights, they kind of bring back some Jaguar F-Type pre-facelift vibes for me. And that is not a bad thing, because I think the F-Type, when it got its very slim horizontal headlights, it took away so much of that exotic feel that I loved in the pre-facelift F-Type, when you had the headlights following upwards on the hood and across the fender. I think that integration was much better than the facelift that they released later on. I think the best part for me of this facelift is the fact that we now have a baseline that is body colored going underneath the grille. So the grille is not just falling like a waterfall into the ground. It actually has a base to sit upon, which is the same color as the rest of the body. And that is something that I wasn't a huge fan of when it comes to the current Aston Martin Vantage. I always think the grille should have almost like a cutout in the front end, and it looks like we're gonna get that with the facelift of the new Vantage. I'm excited to see what else they're gonna change on the Vantage. I hope they're gonna take a lot of inspiration from the DB12's interior as well, because that was also a massive upgrade over the DB11, which looked, again, over stylized. It didn't connect at all with the exterior design, and then they stripped everything down, kept it very elegant and classy on the interior. We still have a cap for the gauge cluster, and I hope a similar interior is going to end up in the Vantage, because we also, in addition to the more classy lines now in the DB12, we still have the physical buttons for the climate control settings. So that would be my perfect upgrade for the Vantage. And then of course, we need to see what they're gonna do to the powertrain. If you're still gonna have 503 horsepower, they're probably gonna bump it up just a little bit to make it a little bit more exciting.